Hi, everyone. Welcome to Jamstack for e-commerce at scale. I am Ishan Anand, CTO at MoveWeb.
And I'm Mark Mercado, VP of Engineering at MoveWeb.
In today's session, we're going to talk about the lessons learned from using Jamstack and Headless e-commerce, especially for sites that have large catalogs, frequent updates, a lot of revenue volume, or you're working with a traditional e-commerce platform like Salesforce Commerce Cloud or Magento, then this is the right session for you. We're going to start by describing a couple common challenges and how we've observed them being solved, specifically around build friction, site migration, personalization, and A/B testing. And then the second half of this will be a fireside chat with people who have been there and solved these problems, specifically Tyler Drone from Shoe Carnival and John Beatles from Turnkey. First off, who are we? We are MoveWeb, and our jam is bringing the benefits of the Jamstack to large, complex e-commerce sites. Folks like these guys, household names like Shoe Carnival, Sharper Image, and bring them the benefits of fast performance and easy development that the Jamstack is known for, but on larger sites using frameworks like these. Of course, Next.js, but also Next and e-commerce specific frameworks like Vue Storefront and React Storefront. We're also core contributors to React Storefront. That's an open source PWA framework designed just for e-commerce with a built-in UI component library targeted just at e-com. It's over 2 years old and has generated over $1 billion in online revenue. And for the conference, we also have a special offer for Next.js conference attendees, a discount on bandwidth. Please see us in Discord or at the rest of the conference if you want to learn more. So let's talk about the classic problems with Jamstack at scale. The first one is really build time friction. And Jamstack, has high traffic scalability built in, but it introduces a new dimension of scaling, which is as the number of pages or the frequency of updates increases, you kind of exit the Jamstack sweet spot and build times become a real source of pain and friction. And it's easy to swipe this under the rug if you're working on a smaller site, but a large part of the internet economy depends on sites that are large and complex that are either powering ads or actually creating money for the rest of the internet. So here on the left, for example, in e-commerce, most of your household names have thousands, if not tens of thousands of SKUs and hence that many pages on their site. And then in content, you look at the large content providers, here we've got a couple examples on the right, generating basically 100,000 stories per year, let alone their whole archives. And then we need to layer on top of this A/B testing and personalization. And so a really important question for the internet is how do we bring the benefits of Jamstack to these large sites that are powering the internet economy? Well, there's a couple of solutions. We're going to run through them all in really lightning speed here. The first one is to just try to optimize your builds and make them faster. So one of these is to do incremental builds. So save the build artifacts and only regenerate what's changed. Another approach is to parallelize the builds as much as possible. And Next will do some of this for you, splitting it across multiple processors. An emerging area is to use a natively powered static site generator. And this is a little on the cutting edge. Most of the static site generators that are natively written aren't actually designed to work well with JavaScript heavy sites. However, Toast, which is really new, is kind of trying to tackle that, and it'll be interesting to see in the coming months and years. Another approach is to just fall completely back onto client-side rendering. And you probably know this as the app shell model. Basically, you tell your CDN, route all of my product or all my URLs to a single HTML page or template. And that page has an app shell with a client-side router on it. And when the JavaScript loads inside the browser, it boots up and grabs the content and displays the page. And this lets you support effectively an infinite number of pages very easily. The cons of this is it can negatively impact performance. So that JavaScript needs to be downloaded, parsed, and executed before the users even sees their content. It may also impact SEO, as some bots can't read JavaScript rendered content. And then you need CDN provider support. Now, luckily, all the Jamstack platforms support. I've got some examples here from Netlify, Vercel, and MoveWeb. Another approach is incremental static generation. And the idea here is you generate new static pages on demand in response as the traffic comes in. And there was kind of a precursor to this on 11D that Phil Hawksworth at Netlify had posted about on CSS Tricks. And then shortly thereafterwards, Next.js basically really formalized this in an easy-to-use manner. And the way it works is a browser requests a page, and when that page hasn't been visited before, the CDN quickly returns a fallback page, which really has just placeholder data. In this case, these are skeletons, and you're seeing an example from the Next.js tweet example, and these are placeholder text you see there, right there. And while that is being served up to the user and displayed, the page's static build process is being run. And when it finishes, basically the JSON data need to populate that page content is rendered out, and the user sees their full page. And then future visits will get the statically built HTML page. Now, there's a enhancement to this called incremental static regeneration, which instead of serving a fallback page could serve a previous version of that page, a play on kind of the stale while revalidate caching strategy. Another approach is to use serverless server-side rendering in conjunction with the CDN. This is building your pages on demand, just using classic serverless server-side rendering. And what's nice about this approach is it's more compatible with the way most traditional e-com platforms are written in, with that same kind of life cycle. So there's less data pipeline re-architecture. And it's a little controversial in the ecosystem, but I would maintain it's Jamstack-ish or Jamstack-like when two conditions are met. First, there's no DevOps and no servers to manage. Basically, you're in a serverless environment, so it's easy for a front-end developer. And the second is when the HTML is being served from the CDN. So you're basically getting Jamstack-like speed for that HTML data. That really requires proper cache management. And when you look at most CDNs and the way they're used, very few people actually cache their HTML. They're using their CDN to cache their images, their JSON, their JavaScript, and their CSS, but not their JSON or their HTML. And so we rolled out something we call CDN as JavaScript to solve this problem. And it gives you a code-based way to manage your CDN from within your application code in an atomic way that lets your client-side routing, your service worker, your edge, and your backend code all be in sync on what's happening in terms of routing and CDN parameters in one piece of code. And it understands your framework's underlying routing, so it understands Next routing, for example, and it can be emulated locally in development. So now you no longer have to push something up to the CDN to find out how it's going to behave. I encourage you to take a look at our cookbook to understand kind of the power of CDN as JavaScript. Another important aspect of proper cache management is knowing what your cache hit rate is. And normally this is hard to find out. It's usually buried essentially in your access logs by URL in a very hard to get way. So what we've done is we've kind of taken that, we've aggregated it by route so that we understand, how your code behaves, so we can tell you by route what your cache hit rate is, and that's available right in the console. And also we have some dev tooling. As you're doing development, you can see how the caching is behaving in conjunction with prefetching, which is really important. I don't have a lot of time to get into it, but another thing that's in the XDN platform is predictive prefetching. Traditional speed optimization is really focused on, what happens after you tap the button and send the data down to the user. But what we do is we look at that time before the user is even tapped and seeing what we can accelerate before that happens so that you can effectively make the network feel like it has zero latency and infinite bandwidth. Okay, another approach to solving build time at scale is parallel static rendering. And in this approach, you use classic kind of serverless server-side rendering with a CDN, but you decouple the rendering and the deployment process. So let me show you an example of this. And what you're seeing in here is a deploy has already just happened. So if any request comes in, the serverless server-side rendering will render it no matter what page it is. And in parallel to the deploy having taken place, the system is going through and looking at what are the most important pages, either the most high traffic, the most likely to have a cache miss, and going and making sure and rendering those in parallel after the deploy process. So this gives you your instantaneous deploy time, as well as giving you instantaneous response times for your most important pages. And then finally, you don't have to choose just one. You can mix static and dynamic techniques. So maybe pick your blog and about us to be static and your product and category pages to be dynamic if you've got a lot of those. And so recommendation here is be on a platform and a framework. Thankfully, Next.js is one of those frameworks that lets you mix paradigms as needed. Another thing that we've seen across a lot of clients is incremental migration. So if you're working on a very large, complex site, you don't want to migrate it all at once in one big, giant, big bang rewrite. What you want to do is gradually migrate it a section at a time. And this requires, again, CDN control in terms of routing. So I've got an example here that basically will inherit whatever your next routes are, and then we'll fall back to the legacy page and serve up kind of the original pages when no Next.js version of that URL exists. Another key thing is the legacy URL support. It's hard to appreciate, but changing your URL structure involves a ton of SEO risks for a very large site. And if you're, say, migrating to something like Next, it may not be compatible with your URL framework. The existing legacy URLs. Now, Next.js does support rewriting support at the path level, but not at the query parameter level yet. CDN as JavaScript can come to the rescue in this example as shown here. And then personalization and segmentation. If you're on a large, complex e-commerce site, you probably have to deal with users across multiple geographies and different languages. Again, this is where the cache needs to be aware of that. Again, CDN as JavaScript gives you a very easy way to segment your cache according to either language, geography, or personalization. And then lastly, A/B testing, really important in a large site where everything is ROI driven. The problem we found with a lot of A/B testing that happens on the client side is it's very poorly performant and actually can nullify your test. So what we did is we added A/B testing at the edge that is penalty-free in terms of performance. So we split the traffic at the edge in a way that preserves all the caching we talked about earlier and can still be integrated into your existing A/B testing tool. Okay, well, that was the whirlwind tour on classic problems, headless at scale. Let's get some real-world insight from our panelists, Tyler Drone from Shoe Carnival and John Beatles from Turnkey, and led by our VP of Engineering, Mark Mercado.
All right, thanks, Ishan. So, John, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your role at Turnkey, and Turnkey's business in general.
Yeah, of course. My name is John Beatles. I'm the lead software engineer, one of the lead software engineers at Turnkey, with the primary focus on our website. And at Turnkey, what we're trying to really do is leverage technology to help both sides of the short-term vacation rental space, both homeowners and guests. So for homeowners, we're trying to provide consistency in things like housekeeping and repairs, as well as help with listing content and all that. And then for guests, we want to create sort of like a brand, right? Like when you're staying at a Turnkey home, regardless of what market that's in, you know what to expect.
Awesome. Tyler, introduce yourself and tell us about your role at Shoe Carnival and Shoe Carnival's business.
Hi, I'm Tyler Drone. I manage the digital development at Shoe Carnival. Shoe Carnival is a family shoe retail store with 400 stores across the United States and online at shoecarnival.com, which is what I manage.
So Tyler, continuing on with you, how is the Shoe Carnival site laid out? What are some of the different page types that you migrated to your new headless architecture?
Yeah, so the most hit pages obviously are the homepage, the product listing pages, and the PDP, the product description pages. Those were the biggest hurdles to get going, but to get onto the headless environment because they have the most advantage of being able to cache and speed.
Gotcha. And how does that compare with you, John? Is Turnkey's layout a similar kind of typical e-commerce layout?
Yeah, I mean, it has some of its like traditional e-commerce stuff with our home listings, and then it's also got some, more marketing-based pages and pages for our actual markets.
Gotcha. So let's talk about the migration from the old architecture into the new headless architecture. So John, what was the prior site architecture like for Turnkey?
Yeah, so we were already on Next.js, luckily, but we were sort of migrating from an old Angular Node application. So we were running the Next.js site in tandem with the old application. We initially we were back on Next.js version 5. So we were running an old custom server. We didn't have a way to do dynamic routes. We hadn't migrated to all of that stuff yet.
Gotcha. And so what approaches did you consider for your migration to headless?
Yeah, I mean, we really looked at a couple of like the Jamstack solutions. We looked seriously, narrowed it down basically between Netlify and MoveWeb.
Gotcha. And you were going to stick with Next.js all along. You were happy with Next.
Yeah, we were extremely happy with Next. Like that was, a big thing for us, was finding a platform that supported Next.js natively. We were really happy with it and continuing to try to push other products internally onto Next.js.
What was the due diligence like in selecting, the new architecture and framework and platform?
Yeah, I mean, it was really trying to find something that would fit into our current pipeline as best as possible. We had just spent 2 years nearly doing this big rewrite refactor, and we didn't want to have to go through that again, right? We didn't want to have to refactor how our code base worked, how our data pipeline worked. Like if we could avoid doing that, that was really one of the major deciding factors for us.
Gotcha. And is that what do you think are the biggest things that drove that final decision?
Yeah, so I mean, the biggest thing really was that we could do this incremental migration, right? Like we had still pages that were not on React yet, not on Next yet, running in this old architecture. So the fact that we could take what we'd already migrated, put that on the MoveWeb platform, and then continue to bring the rest of it in line, that was really the big deciding factor for me.
And
Gotcha.
John, my understanding is you were on Elastic Beanstalk. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. So we were on just running the app inside of Docker on Elastic Beanstalk. And that was fine for a while, but once we really wanted to start digging into performance and all of those things, we run a really lean team at Turnkey. We don't have a traditional DevOps structure. We kind of handle that stuff ourselves as best as we can. So we sort of outgrew what we were able to do on Beanstalk and needed something that gave us more insight into performance and things like that.
Gotcha. So you want to just walk us briefly through the slide here in terms of your current architecture that you migrated to?
Yeah, exactly. So all of our business data is stored in Salesforce, and then we basically have a Redis cache that pulls for data changes in Salesforce regularly. And then all of our data fetching for the website is done from a GraphQL backend that really just reads from that Redis cache. And then we were just talking directly to the GraphQL backend. But now that we have the XDN, that lives really in between the data layer and the website. So we're able to cache some GraphQL stuff using XDN, and then all the Next.js build stuff comes directly from the XDN.
Okay, very good. So turning to Tyler, before you migrated to your new headless architecture, what was the prior site architecture at Carnival?
Yeah, so we've been on Salesforce Commerce Cloud for a couple of years now. We use the built-in Site Genesis front end that is part of the platform. So that's just kind of how everybody kind of uses Commerce Cloud out of the box.
Gotcha. And what approaches did you consider for migrating to headless?
Yeah, so we went through a couple different partners to look at the best way to implement a headless environment. We looked at MoveWeb, we looked at Mobify, and we also looked at just doing it all in-house ourselves. And so we kind of went across all those to see what was out there and what technology was being used and what was the best technology stack that was going on. Common things that we always found was JavaScript front end was always a must. I think we always came back to React as being the most common, especially in this vertical. And then also from a resource perspective, it's much easier to find React developers than it is to find Salesforce Commerce Cloud developers. And then past that, we went into which platform or which service was going to be the most compatible with our development group. Which one was going to be able to work with us in a co-development perspective, so that we could do things the way that we want to do them and understand them and be able to work on this going forward.
What do you think were the major drivers that made you decide on MoveWeb in the end?
Yeah, so MoveWeb definitely felt more developer friendly. We understood things, how they worked. The operating with the XDN SDK was easy. Comparative to the other partners, MoveWeb was very open for a co-development perspective rather than a full service professional services engagement where it was all hands off for us until it was done. Then also the incremental deployment pieces of being able to only do a couple pages while leaving the rest of like checkout and cart in the origin was a very big factor. We could get it to production much faster than having to build a complete application and deploy it.
Can you let's drill down into this architecture for the new site now?
Yeah. So we have the XDN is the edge, and that all traffic comes through that. Right now, when we come in, the XDN is deciding whether this is a mobile device or not. If it is a mobile device, it goes to our React Storefront front end. If it is a desktop, it goes to Origin, which is Salesforce Commerce Cloud, which also has its own CDN in front of it, and that's kind of built into its whole piece. When they were going down the React Storefront path, all of its calls to get any of the product data, any of the Commerce Cloud data is going through the XDN serverless JavaScript to make those calls to Commerce Cloud and then back and then up. So we heavily can do a lot of caching since we're only making updates really nightly to the site. So a lot of those calls can be helped out by caching and speeding up the process.
Gotcha. Okay. So next, I'd like to talk about some of the practical aspects of migrating to a new either React-based site or Next.js-based site, as well as the MoveWeb XDN, Jamstack platform. So tell us a little bit about the team that did this migration. We'll start with John. What experience did they have with React or Next.js before putting up the new site on the XDN?
Yeah, so like I said, we've been migrating to Next for the past little over 2 years now. So we felt like we were pretty well versed in Next.js. We hadn't quite been able to take full advantage of a lot of the newer stuff yet, but this did provide us an opportunity to do that. So.
And specifically migrating your app from a previous traditional server architecture to a serverless architecture on the XDN, how long did that migration take for this new headless?
Yeah, I'd say the total migration, the work itself probably took about 6 weeks with, we had 2 or so weeks of pretty aggressive regression testing and stuff like that since it ended up being, a fairly sizable refactor under the hood for us. This allowed us to completely get rid of our custom server code. We're completely on Next.js routing now. So we were able to, leverage the time to do this to also really improve and get everything up to the latest technology.
And what was the scope of that migration? What percentage of your new site is in Next.js versus maybe an older experience that doesn't use Next.js?
Yeah, so we're actually, as part of this, we were able to get the last few bits that were kind of hanging on the old site. So we were able to move our sitemap and a couple of other just content pages that we had just saved for last. This was a perfect opportunity to go ahead and handle that as well. So as of now, we're actually 100% on Next.js and running through the XDN.
Gotcha. Okay, so Tyler, your team had a little bit longer of a road to hoe there because John was just going from Next 5 to Next 9. You guys were coming from a traditional Salesforce backend to a new React headless front end. What was that process like, and what experience did the team have with React prior to doing that migration?
For sure. So we had some light experience with React, and definitely not in a enterprise e-commerce experience, setting. It was a much different implementation because Salesforce Commerce Cloud is not really meant to have a headless front end on it. So there was a lot of engineering and understanding on the Salesforce side to be able to execute the data to the front end. But all those challenges could be, solved because of the flexibility with the XDN backend that was able to, kind of be the in-between man of the React front end, so that we could build the React front end however we wanted to, and not be limited by Salesforce's downsides from a headless perspective. Took a little bit longer, but we're definitely happy with the result.
Gotcha. How long did that migration take in total?
It was about 12 weeks.
Gotcha. And did you wind up migrating for the mobile site all of the pages to React,
No.
or is there still some in the going directly?
We still have the account pages and cart and checkout are origin. We were planning to tackle those, and we got to the point where we decided that it was time to start pulling those into the React. And we kind of made a reevaluation of where we were, what we had learned from all past experience of implementing with Salesforce. And we kind of decided to kind of stop and then look at Next.js. And so now we are building a Next.js application rather than the React storefront. Just because where we've been and where we're going, we understand that the Next.js is definitely where we want to be. So we're kind of rebuilding it from scratch again, completely in Next.
Gotcha. Since you migrated to the XDN, what benefits have you seen in terms of like team agility and productivity?
Yeah, definitely time to production has drastically increased. And a lot of that is just from the ability to be separate from the Salesforce development cycles and be able to be move around those kind of sprints and timelines and things like that are tied to a bigger back end implementations. With the front end, we can make very quick, seamless changes and deployments. Also, because the CI/CD process of that move web app is very seamless and very reassuring from rollback and for being able to navigate traffic away from it if need be. So definitely. Speed to production is a big one. Speed in general. And we went from a 5 to 6 second average payload to sub-second. And that's definitely always, I'd say leveraging the cache in ways that we can, rather than having like a one size fits all for caching. We can cache things at a very granular level and be able to manage that so that what the customers are looking for is always available and it's always up to date.
Mm-hmm. Have you? Can you quantify the changes that you've seen in conversion rate?
Yeah, it's hard to compare apples to apples on conversions rate. What we do know that is every time that we tested the origin site with the headless site for conversion, A/B testing it 50% at the CDN level, the headless always wins. It's always been able to outproduce or outperform the origin site and we can almost always contribute that to speed and usability.
Mm-hmm. Got it. John, on your side, what are some of the benefits that your team saw in terms of agility and productivity?
Yeah, so we were on sort of like a custom pipeline that we had built inside of Jenkins, and we were deploying everything from a trunk branch, and we sort of never had complete confidence, right, in what was getting ready to go out into production. But with the developer experience that MoveWeb provides, which I think is just as valuable as the technological side of things, right? We haven't talked about that as much, but being able to have all of our branches have their own individual environments now, and then we can set up pristine environments. Now our staging environment, we don't merge into it until we know that something has passed QA. Those kind of things really remove that mental burden, right? So now whenever we deploy something, we're confident. We know what we're deploying, and we know that it's passed QA. So that's one of the big benefits. The other, another huge benefit for me was with our application being on Beanstalk. I don't know, who's worked with Beanstalk, but digging through server logs in Beanstalk can be kind of a nightmare sometimes. You have to really figure out exactly which logs you're looking for, figure out which server they're on, if they're load balanced, all of that stuff, right? But in the MoveWeb console, you can actually live stream logs directly from your build. So you can find whichever build you need to troubleshoot, and you press play and you watch the logs come through. And like for me, that was amazing. So things like that is really where we're seeing a lot of the gains.
That's great to hear, because that was not the easiest feature to implement, but we're really glad as a team to hear that.
We use it. We use it all the time. It's been extremely useful for us.
Awesome. What about conversion rate? Have you seen differences in conversion rate since you moved?
So we're still relatively new on it, right? So we haven't really determined all of that yet. But as far as just like general speed goes, our goal was to just get on the platform, and then we can start refining our caching later. And just the eyeball test of load times and stuff is through the roof. Like our site increased pretty dramatically as soon as we got on it. Our executives noticed, they were extremely excited about it. That's given us a lot of opportunity to continue to focus on improving performance and all of that. So, now that we're on the platform we're focusing on caching individual pages and just trying to improve, performance in our high SEO areas as much as possible.
That's great to hear. So overall, how has the experience been with MoveWeb, and are there any features other than the log streaming that you would highlight as being your favorites?
Yeah, I mean, being able to set up, like I said, individual environments and have those push for each of our branches, that's really improved our process. I also think just, working with you guys, the support that you gave and being able to ask questions and have knowledgeable people who actually care and want to get back to us as quickly as possible and help us make our product better, that has been one of the best parts of it as well.
Glad to hear. Tyler, how about with you? What has the experience been like with the MoveWeb XDN so far? And are there any features that you want to highlight?
Some of the features are the ones that we don't have to really think about. And that's kind of one of the reasons, when we were comparing MoveWeb versus, doing this in-house, we talked about, the cloud administrative side of it, and needing to be able to admin those different resources and things like that. We don't have to think about that. The MoveWeb console just takes care of that. The XDN works seamlessly. So it's kind of that feature that we don't have to do is one of the best things. And our developers can just focus, we're a small, tight team. Our developers can just focus on the development side and don't have to worry about the actual administrative side of it.
That's great to hear. Yeah, I suppose for both of your teams, I suppose I know, John, with your team, you were acting as DevOps, but you didn't have dedicated DevOps engineers. Now I suppose with Serverless and MoveWeb, you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, it's completely removed that mental overhead, right? So now that frees me up to actually focus on, bigger picture things, or focus on where we can really get these performance gains instead of just constantly worrying about our pipeline and if it's working properly or if there's anything else we can do. So yeah, that's been a huge help.
Very cool. All right. Thank you, John. Thank you, Tyler. So as most of you in the audience probably know, this session was recorded, but we are available right now in the live chat to take your questions and interact with you. So join us there or on our Discord channel. Ishan, any last words before we end this?
Thank you to Tyler and John for joining us and participating, and hope everyone has a great Next.js conference.
Thank you, everybody. See you.